be in Europe for the first time. I've never been over here. I've got to pick up an Irish accent before I go home. It's not going back to that. At least got something silly, like a Scottish brogue would be nice. I can get back and nobody can understand anything I'm saying. I wanted to talk with y'all about ways of talking about the heart and the mind, or thinking and feeling. We can split those two things up, almost like feminine and male aspects. I've got it written down as reason and the wild within. It is being the two things. Reason as the head, and this wild within as the heart. I found out most of the years I've been a very intuitive person, and I think a lot of that was just pure laziness, because I thought that it was so much easier just to feel things than to think you actually had to do something. That was way too much work. So my rationalization of it was just to stay on the, the feeling end of it without the learning how to think straight. Also, a lot of drinking and drugs in my past, tended to make it go that way. You just get into moods and thinking and feeling, but that can lead into what you might call magical thinking. Then you get into trusting, like somebody was saying this morning about whims and whimsicalness. You can start thinking that your feelings are right, no matter what they are, and you can't remember one to the next. So you're always intuitive. I know exactly what I'm doing because I want to do it. And you don't use any kind of common sense to, question that. So coming down the thinking side of it was really hard for me. After my realization, I found I had a strange thing happen to me. I all of a sudden started thinking that it would be a nice thing to do, was to learn how to think. And it came out in the form of trying to write prose rather than poetry. So I would sit there on the computer and see, how the heck do I get this stuff to make sense in a linear fashion? Keep writing and writing and writing it, and trying to get it down to where I could think straight like that. And it was just amazing, because I've never thought about having to do things like that much of a sense. I knew a little bit about that from a lot of climbing and skiing and taking trips that I had to plan the trip out. But that became mainly habit, or else I think it happened without me knowing it. So that I didn't have to admit that I was actually thinking about something. We've got this wild within thing. There's a fellow photographer in New England called Paul Resendez, who I've always admired from his photography business, but he wrote a little book called The Wild Within. He was a student of Krishnamurti, and he was also a tracker and a stalker. He'd take people out in the woods and show them how to stalk bobcats and bears and things. And he learned over the years that what he had been doing, studying with Krishnamurti, was trying to figure out how to stalk himself, and how he came about finding this wild within. He was a very wild guy. He was a leader of a motorcycle gang, went to prison for murder, and Lord knows what else. He was also a practicing Catholic. So he was very much went into the heart. But he talks about this wild within too, with that, is how is finding a part of us that isn't reasonable, isn't thinking. Well, if we get these two things, that linear thinking and the wild within, we talk about them, there's also, those are bouncing back and forth with, like Art was saying something about, that's how the mind works. Those are two facets of it, of this mind dimension. We can work those two together and hopefully do something called triangulation, where if those things are on the bottom, we can find something up above them. Tess was talking about one of these guys, and there's another one too, Tommy Tiernan, I think of the comic from Galway here. And I watched a video just out of the blue on him. It was funny how all these Irish things started popping up. But I found that Tommy Tiernan had some pretty good points about the Irish mentality, even though I think his acts, like a lot of comics nowadays, get a little vulgar. But he says that the Irish soul inside, he can't figure out how to get what he's trying to say in the Irish soul out through this wall of language and out into English. He says part of that's because English isn't my native tongue. So people say, well, why don't you talk in Gaelic? And he says, well, I can't because I don't know a word of it. It's like, I'm stuck with it. So he says to describe this Irish soul inside, which I might be calling the wild within, is kind of like, best way he describes it is just, yes, look at this, it's a beautiful day. Oh my God, it's a heart. Ooh, there's a pretty girl. Ooh, there's guys. It's just this exuberant little kid expression coming out. And he says, how do you get that up through here and out through the front and out and talk to somebody about it? Well, what the heck do you do? So the strange thing was he was pals with John Moriarty, who to me is very able to do that. And Tiernan said he bought one of John's books and couldn't read a word of it. But they used to hang out together and talk. There's a couple of videos on YouTube with it. And one of them, Moriarty is talking about how this wild within, he describes it in different ways and in different animal symbolism, but how the wild within has to be kept alive in you. You have to have that spirit in there. Especially if you're on the spiritual path, how are you going to keep the interest and the energy and the vitality up? And he says if you don't keep that wild within alive, if this dies out in you, then you're just one of the people outside who's walking around walking dead. I think Rose used to talk a little bit about something about some of the people out there are just dead inside. You know, there's nothing much to them, they're just robots. Not much of this stuff is left. You know, this wild within's got to be somehow kept alive. My grandfather down we were in the rural South, would take me to gun shows. He was a gun collector, and we'd go shoot guns and go to these gun shows to look for different kinds of firearms. And we had a friend up in Magnolia, Mississippi. And we go up to Mississippi to go to a gun show to visit his friend. And every time we drive through the town and going into Mississippi, the sign would say, "Welcome to Magnolia." And he'd go, "Welcome to Magnolia, land of the living dead." And I was sitting there as a little kid, and I was like, they don't look dead, you know? What is he talking about? But he'd say this every time. And it stuck with me. And when I got a little older up, I thought, I know what he's talking about, you know? These people are just stuck. You know, they're doing the same thing their dad did. They're thinking the same way that they're told to think. They have no doubts, you know, in their mind, no questioning about it. That wild within, just for some reason or other, didn't stay alive in them. And I think that's true everywhere, not just in Magnolia. And we're not talking too much about what Tiernan says with, you know, this higher soul within, about going crazy or going native with it. Some people have said, "Oh, I'm scared to get too much questioning in this spiritual path or surrender because I'm scared I'm going to end up running, screaming down the street with my clothes off." You know? They have these strange fears, you know, letting control of the ego, letting it go away. But I don't think you've got to worry about that too much, because if you're serious enough about the spiritual path, you'll get enough help and something will, you'll keep it somewhat practical, hopefully anyway. William Blake gave some good explanations about these two sides to us too. He would call them reason and energy. And he said that reason is the outer bound circumference of energy. It's what keeps energy directed and controlled. And the energy's primary, and that reasoning part of us is how you control that energy and direct it. So if we can get that energy in a direction and point it upwards into the spiritual path and say have a controlled bound circumference to it, if we can increase it through reason, through common sense, to protect our energy and vitality and have a direction for it, then maybe we can point it into something so that it comes up above the triangle. So we've got reason and energy, we can get off that bouncing baseline down there up to something higher, which I usually call the listening attention of the child. On the bottom baseline, you might have good and bad. You might have, you know, evil and saintliness, up, down, left and right, reason in the heart. On this baseline, but we're always being shoved over one side or the other. You know, well, what's controlling us today? How do we get through that? Because of the mind's duality with either or. It's either got to be good or else I'm bad. I'm an egomaniac or I'm inferior. You know, we bounce back and forth. So how do we find something that's in the middle and say and instead? So where I can see that there's good and bad. There's obviously left and right, up and down. We can transcend that to and rather than either or. We can maybe get up on a higher plane where something more is possible rather than being down stuck in the duality. Blake says that without these contraries, though, we have no progression. We wouldn't have the triangle. Nothing would be able to push us up. He says we have to have these things. We have to have the contraries in order to shove us up to there with the tension that builds up off of these two. Or else we'd just be endlessly trapped. There is that way out. There is something above that. Rose said that, one of his quotes here I've got is that individual genius is directly related to the ability by that individual to know and store and properly use quantum energy. It's likewise with spiritual progress. Spiritual progress depends upon that transmuted energy. Now here we have that energy which can go to either promote spiritual progress or individual genius, and the progress depends upon that transmuted energy because we know how to store it and properly use it. That's the reason part that I could never figure out. I couldn't figure out why I would get into such amazing depressions after being so intuitive and so high. Right up to the pinnacle, and then wonder why the next day, oh my gosh, what happened? I think our primary response that we have, it isn't here. That we have a primary response, like if somebody slams a book down right now, you can kind of feel that response right here. And then it comes up through the mind and a book slammed down. But it comes through what you might call the central nervous system first. And then it goes into the cerebral hemispheres. You get that a little secondary reaction is through the thought processes. And if you want to have a change of mind or a change of heart, you can work at it from one side or the other. If we think about spiritual work and we take it into the mind and we accept those things, see there's something to it, then eventually it might sink down into you and the heart might start agreeing with it. Then we'll get more vitality, we'll be more agreeable to the thing and want to actually take action on it. Then the same way around, where do we get our longing from? The longing and the question that we have to have that can push us through the spiritual path. For me it was always, what is going on? Who am I, or more clearly, what am I? Why is this all happening rather than nothing? What is this? That came from here, and then I had to somehow or another let it come up, translate it through thinking in order to take action on it. So this mind and the heart both work in tandem here rather than trying to lock them up and only go with one side or the other. You can have a realization or understanding that might change us. It comes down through the mind into here. If it's big enough when it can make a shock in here, you can actually feel the difference in there. And this gives a shock, and it's like something that will actually change inside of you. It might actually waken something up. I can remember talking to folks at different points in my life that when they were telling me their life story or talking about their families, things that had happened to them, I kept thinking, they're making this up. They're just talking about this to put up a backstory so that they've got some reason to talk to people about having a life, because I couldn't feel anything. There was no affect to it. When they would talk about it, they were just dead. There was nothing there. So these people haven't had that, say, shock that comes down in there and wakens this up. So when you talk to somebody you can feel that they're related to their heart. When you're talking to them, there's something there. It's not just like a movie script they're reading.